Hello from the south of France, where the sun has finally come out after lots of grey and drizzly days. I've been working for the last week or so with a Blackmagic cinema camera on Harriet Sam's The First Musketeer, and I know there's been a lot of buzz around this camera, so I thought I'd share some of my thoughts on it, my initial thoughts of it with you, and take you through a comparison with the camera that I own and that many of you I'm sure will be familiar with, or something similar, the Canon 600D or T3i. Now, the Blackmagic Cinema camera shoots 2.5K images. There's a 4K version out now, but this is the cinema camera, the 2.5K version. What it does is it downsamples that to 1080p, and it does that nicely so that you get nice anti-aliased images, and it's quite a filmic look to it. Contrast that with this, which is essentially a stills camera and has a very high stills resolution, but it can only shoot video in 1080p, and rather than anti-aliasing it down, all it does is it throws away a lot of the pixels. And one of the results of that is that any sort of grid patterns, any sort of fabric that's in focus, any sort of repeating patterns get this sort of murraying effect, jagged lines, aliasing, looks kind of nasty. So that's one of the advantages of the Blackmagic, is that those effects are softened out by this 2.5K downsampling to 1080p. The big headline thing with the Blackmagic is its dynamic range. It has 13 stops of dynamic range versus about 10 or 11 on a DSLR. What that means in practice is, for example, the other night we had a shot where there was a light just out of frame and it was backlighting our characters, and it was also bouncing off the actor's shirt and lighting the actress's face from this bounce light. Now, on a camera with a narrow dynamic range, it would be very hard to correctly expose the direct backlight from this lamp and the bounce off the shirt, which is much weaker, without either the backlight clipping out, blowing out, or the bounce light being too dark and being lost in the blacks. But the Blackmagic was able to handle that. So that's the kind of thing you can do with a camera with a greater dynamic range. Is it allows you to, it gives you more flexibility in the lighting. You don't need to cheat things quite as much as you might have done with a camera with a smaller dynamic range. Back in the days of Mini DV or something, you would have had to totally have cheated that and had a second lamp that was much brighter bouncing off the actor's shirt. As you can see, the camera I'm shooting this video blog on has a very poor dynamic range because I'm all clipping and getting crushed blacks and stuff all over my face, but I'll carry on anyway. The Blackmagic is slightly better for audio than the DSLRs in that it has two 1/4-inch jacks in it and actually has a headphone socket so you can monitor the sound. However, don't do it. Shoot dual system sound. I don't think you're ever going to get any really professional quality results out of this camera for audio. It's a lot larger and much heavier, in fact even heavier than it looks, the Blackmagic. That means it's going to be harder to rig. You know, with the 600D I can get a C-stand, put a couple of arms on the top of the C-stand, sandbag the end of it, and I can clamp it to get a bird's eye shot looking straight down very easily. It's much harder to do that with a camera as heavy as the Blackmagic. I also find it very awkward on the shoulder rig because the 600D has a nice flip-out screen, and I just put a loop viewfinder on there and it becomes just like a viewfinder on a traditional video camera. This just has a fixed and very reflective screen, dropping a lens cap everywhere, very reflective screen on the back. And what that means is it's very hard to see it, particularly in bright daylight. I've actually been attaching to my shoulder rig a big piece of cloth that I can put over my head, box brownie style, so that I can actually see the screen, which isn't ideal. And when you put it on the rig, it's kind of right here by your face, and you're sort of like this, and it gets very tiring on your neck. So really, I would say if you're going to be seriously shooting with this, you need to be looking at getting a Lilliput monitor or something you can mount on your rig, an angle, or an electronic viewfinder, so that you can always see what's going on. Speaking of monitoring, one advantage the Blackmagic has over the DSLRs is that you can just plug in a monitor and you know, the director and the rest of the crew can see what's going on. We found that really crucial on a big shoot We have a lot of crew, and some of them aren't doing much when the camera's actually rolling, and they want to see the results of their hard work. We have a very hard-working, very talented art department, and they want to be able to see what's in frame and what they need to adjust. So having a monitor is vital for us. With the DSLRs, of course, if you plug in an external monitor, the screen on the camera goes off, so the cameraman is then blind, can't pull focus, etc., etc. So the Blackmagic scores out there. Blackmagic uses SSD cards, which are very large, both physically and in terms of the amount of data they can record. This is a 240 gigabyte card. We find we shoot 40 to 100 gigs a day. We're shooting in ProRes mode. Blackmagic has three recording formats it can use: ProRes or DNx HD, both at 1080p, or RAW at full 2.5K. Now the RAW files are very, very large. Initially, Harriet, the director, wanted to shoot RAW, but when we did the calculations, we worked out if we were going to make 2 backups of everything, we were going to need to buy a new 10 terabyte hard drive pretty much every day. So that gives you an idea of the ridiculous file size of RAW. So I know it's a very appealing aspect of the Blackmagic, but you've got to give some serious thought to whether you can actually accommodate that workflow. With the DSLRs, of course, you can record about 20 minutes in 1080p on a 8 gig card. What else would I like to say about these? The DSLR can do slow-mo, only at 720p, but it can go to 50 frames a second, or I think 60 if you're in NTSC mode. The Blackmagic can't. It doesn't go any faster than 30 frames a second, so that's something to bear in mind. What are my thoughts overall? Well, price-wise, this is about 1,400 quid, whereas this was £600 new. You could get it for cheaper now, and of course the 650D, I think it is, the next model is out as well. So this is, sort of 3 times the price. Is it worth 3 times the price? I'm not sure. Maybe twice the price. Undoubtedly, it's a better camera. The images, from what I've seen so far, do come out better than on the DSLRs. And I think, if you had a Lilliput monitor, this would be a better camera generally to handle and to work with day to day on a shoot. But if you already own a DSLR and you're thinking of upgrading to the Blackmagic, not sure if it's better enough to warrant the hassle of changing your camera, to be honest. Even though you'd be able to use the same lenses if you got one with the EF mount, which this is. I'm using the lenses that I normally use on my 600D. Yeah, I think you'd be better off saving up some more and going for something that's a bit... that doesn't have so many problems like, the Canon C100 or C300. It just sort of works out of the box. You don't need to be having monitors and other things to it. And batteries as well. The internal battery in here has a very short life, about an hour. We've been using it with a V-Lock battery, which lasts about 6 hours, which also charges the internal battery when it's hooked up as well. So it's a shame that a lot of the cameras that are coming out today do need so many add-ons to make them functional. I do miss the days when you could get something like a Canon XL1 and basically you didn't need to stick a load of things on it. It just sort of worked, and it was ergonomical, and it sat on your shoulder, and the viewfinder was in the right place, and you could see it. Please, people out there designing cameras, build cameras like that, and not things to the bricks that you need to stick a load of stuff to. Yeah, so overall, it's a very nice camera. I'm very pleased to be using it, and I think the images coming out of it are great. The real test will be when we get it into the grade and see what we can do with the colours and the contrast, and how much we can tweak things, what we can do with power windows and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'd say if you already own a DSLR, I'm not sure the Blackmagic is a great thing to step up to. I'd say set your sights a bit higher. So that's my thoughts initially on the Blackmagic. At the end of the shoot, I may have some more things to say about it, having worked with it for a bit longer. Thanks, and goodbye.